Learning piano as an adult seems to be just an endless list of frustrations, and most of which are in our own mind, really. They come from mistaken ideas about how fast we should be able to learn piano, how quickly we should be able to progress to advanced pieces, how difficult it is to actually coordinate our hands, and this idea that everybody else has it easy and for some reason we're the only ones who are struggling with this. Today I want to look at one of the most common frustrations I hear adult learners talking about, and that is the experience of working hard to learn a piece of music, and then you move on to a new piece of music, and within a few days it seems you've forgotten the first one. And of course, underlying the frustration in this experience is again the idea that this is just something that happens to us and everybody else is able to remember everything. But first of all, I want to make it clear that this is a completely normal part of human functioning, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with your memory if you find that you've forgotten a piece of music that you're working on a couple of weeks ago because you've started a new one. In this video, I want to lay out how memory actually is laid down and how we can take advantage of our knowledge of that process to make sure that we don't forget everything we've learned, or at least we're able to remember the pieces that we want to remember. We don't necessarily need to commit every piece we learn to memory, but there certainly will be pieces that we enjoy more than others that we would like to have part of our repertoire, and we don't want to forget them. And when I talk about committing something to memory, I don't necessarily mean playing from memory. It just means, being able to open that page and play through a piece of music. There's a certain amount of memory involved in that as well. So I'm including that kind of memory as well. So first of all, I want to talk about the myth of the superior memory. Now, of course, there is a variation in how good different people's memories are, and some people do really have exceptional memories. But that's not to say that they don't have the same process to go through as the rest of us. It's just that maybe it works a little bit faster for them. And to illustrate this, I want to draw on the now very famous experience of the Portuguese concert pianist Maria João Pires. And you'll probably have seen the video where she's sitting down ready to play a concerto. I think it's in Amsterdam, and the orchestra begins, and then you have a look of horror on her face and she realizes she was prepared for a different piece entirely. But somehow she's able to pull the right piece out of the bag from memory and plays through flawlessly. So when we look at an experience like that, it's very easy for us to think, that's why, these people are professionals. They've got this incredibly superior memory and it all comes quite easily to them. It's much harder for us mere mortals. We just don't have that kind of memory power. But Maria João Pires did a very interesting interview a few months ago with Classic FM, and she talks about that experience, and in it she mentions that she doesn't have what she considers to be an exceptional memory. She says she has quite an average memory, and she knows there are people who do have exceptional memories, but she's not one of them. So that leaves us thinking, well, if she calls that an average memory, well then what's going on? That was an exceptional thing to do. By the way, she says that wasn't the first time that had happened to her, that was about the third time something like that had happened to her. Never a pleasant experience, but she was prepared for it. And there's a reason that she was actually able to do that, and that's what we're going to go through now, because I want to talk about how memory works and how we can take our knowledge of it and apply that to learning pieces and retaining them. So let me dive in. There are three parts to forming memories or learning a skill. The first part is encoding, the second part is processing, and the third part is retrieval. Now, as musicians, when we're learning a piece of music, we spend a lot of time in the encoding, which means we're just in the learning of the piece of music. We're at the piano, we're practicing it, we're going over it again and again. That's all part of the encoding. Processing is something that happens naturally. As soon as you walk away from the piano, your brain starts to actually process the information, and it does a lot of work while you're asleep, so that when you come back to the piano the next day, it's not like you're going back to the start every time you sit down at the piano and work on a piece of music. But the third part is, for us, the most interesting part, and the one that we can really take advantage when we don't want to forget a piece of music, and that's the process of retrieval. Because actually it's in the retrieval of something that we have learned that the memory of it is formed. And that's the bit that we tend to leave out. So we spend a lot of time on the encoding process, and oftentimes it's done in an incomplete way. And by that I mean we rely a lot on muscle memory. So you learn something by playing through and playing through and playing through and playing through until your fingers know what to do. So in fact, from the very beginning, if this is your method of practicing, your ability to recall the piece later on is already impacted because you're relying on one kind of memory, which is muscle memory. A really solid learning of a piece of music requires that we also employ analytical memory, sort of cognitive memory, visual memory, aural memory, all those things combined so that we really know a piece of music inside out. And our processing then might also be at a bit of a disadvantage, because if our practicing is sloppy and inaccurate, that's what you're giving the brain to work with, so that's what it's got to process. So those first two steps to laying down a memory are absolutely crucial as well. But what I really want to focus on today is the retrieval process. And just referring back to Maria João Perez's interview, she mentions that she had played the concerto that she was intended to play that day, something like 10 or 11 months previously. And she mentions that after that stretch of time, her memory of it was starting to decay. So her horror at having to come up with it very suddenly, and you could see it, the look on her face, she's absolutely sick with fear. And that came from some self-doubt that she would be able to retrieve the memory after all that time. Because it's natural that our memories do start to decay if we haven't practiced or rehearsed something. But you can be absolutely certain that if she says she didn't play that concerto in the previous 10 or 11 months, she doesn't mean that she only learnt it 10 or 11 months ago. That would have been a concerto that she would have returned to many, many times over the course of her career. So that retrieval, that going back and pulling out the memory again and again and again, would have been laid down. And the more often you do that, the more likely it is that you would be able to, as she did, pull it out of the bag 10 or 11 months after the last time you played it, even if, as she claims, to have just an average memory. Because with sufficient retrieval, almost any memory or skill can become pretty much permanent. So the question for us is, well, how do we take that information and actually apply it to our own work? What tends to happen when we finish one piece of music and move on to another is we stop playing the first piece of music, or we don't play it again until several weeks later because we've been concentrating on something else. So very often that retrieval process hasn't been applied anything like enough to start forming a permanent memory of that piece. So it stands to reason that if we want to counteract that memory decay, we need to keep playing the piece of music. So there's a way we can do this to help us not just retain the piece of music, but actually to make that memory of it stronger and stronger over time. And the way we can do this is a process called spaced repetition. So let's say you've just finished learning a piece of music and it's one that you want to keep. It's one you really enjoy playing. It's a lovely piece, but you are moving on to something new. If you want to retain that piece of music, you need to set in place a schedule whereby you return to the music and play it at regular intervals that become more and more spaced out over time. So for example, in the first week after you finish that piece of music, you should probably play it at least twice a day. Just every day for that first week, play it twice a day. The week after that, you could play it maybe once a day. The third week, maybe 3 times during the week. The fourth week, maybe twice. The fifth week, maybe once. And then maybe every 2 weeks, maybe once a month. But you're coming back to it at regular intervals, but just that the intervals themselves are getting longer and longer. And what that means is that you're forcing your brain to retrieve that information at regular intervals, but those intervals are getting a little bit spaced out, just a little bit. No drastic jump at the beginning. But as those intervals become wider and wider, you're reinforcing your memory of the music. You're giving it just enough time to make it a little bit more challenging to recall that music, and then you're coming back to it and having the brain pull out that information again and making the memory of it stronger as you go. So it doesn't mean you have to play every single piece of music you want to remember every day, because nobody would have time for that. But it would mean if you were moving through various pieces of music that you would always have something on the go. There's 1 or 2 pieces of music that as part of your practice, your schedule might dictate, oh, it's time to play that piece. I haven't played that piece in a month. My schedule says it's time to play it again today. You might have another piece that you just finished last week, so that's a piece you're playing every day. You might have a piece that you learned quite a long time ago and you're just going, okay, it's time to revisit. I haven't played that in 6 months. Nowadays, these things are quite easy to keep track of because you can just set up a schedule of reminders in your phone. Or if you keep a practice diary, you can write in for various dates what you're due to practice that day. And you may find that if there's a little bit of a wider gap since the last time you played it, there may be some memory decay. You may need to relearn a little part of it. You may need to just look at it a little bit more closely again and recall what's going on there. But that's a good thing. That means you're deepening your knowledge of the piece each time you come back to it. And eventually, like Maria João Perez, you'll find that there's a piece of music that you haven't played in a year and you decide to sit down and play it and it's there for you because you've gone through this process of returning and returning and returning to it over time. In this video, we touched on various aspects of learning music. We've talked about memorization, we've talked a little bit about proper encoding and proper practicing, and we've talked about spaced repetition. If you'd like a more structured approach to all of that, I'd invite you to come and check out the Lekela Music membership because I cover all of that in a very structured way. You have courses on each of these various aspects of learning music. Plus we have live lessons every Monday evening at elementary and early intermediate level at the moment. We'll be progressing that to intermediate and early advanced fairly soon. And we go through all of this. With each piece that we learn, the focus is on good practice techniques, on understanding our music from a cognitive point of view. And with each completed piece that we go through, I'll be encouraging spaced repetition as a way of retaining that piece. We have a fantastically encouraging and warm community of piano players. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in, please head over to my website and sign up for your 7-day free trial so you can check it all out for yourself and see all the resources that are available to you. If you're watching all this and thinking, well, I would have liked to have done that with a piece, one of my favourite pieces that I learned maybe 3 pieces ago and I've forgotten it. Well, why not relearn it? Already by doing that, you'll be putting some of these theories into practice. You will have to retrieve your memory of the music that you worked on before, and you may have to do a lot of relearning, but I promise you it's not all lost. And then you can take it from there, start the spaced repetition process from there. If you are planning to relearn a piece of music, then maybe spend a little time on understanding the music better from a key signature point of view, for example, knowing what chords are likely to be in play, what the structure of the piece is, where the landmarks are, anything that can help you understand the music from an intellectual point of view so that you're not relying entirely on muscle memory. And I'd love to hear how you get on with this, so please do let me know in the comments. I'm always interested to hear how you're getting on. I'm also interested in hearing your thoughts or experience with its spaced repetition if you've come across it before, so let me know your thoughts about that as well, and I'll talk to you soon, and in the meantime, happy practicing.